How to Run for Local Office. I'm Betsy DeWitt, President of the Brookline League of Women Voters. In normal times, we'd love to hold a series of workshops around town. However, under COVID conditions, this event is being recorded by Brookline Interactive Group, our local public media service, and will be available online for later viewing. Helpful resources for candidates or folks thinking about it are a How to Run booklet, which is available in PDF form on the Brookline League of Women Voters website, and also the Brookline Town Meeting Handbook, which is available as a PDF on the Brookline Town website under the subcategory Town Meeting. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that works to give all voters accurate information to encourage informed discourse and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. This year, the League is planning a series of virtual discussions with various topics in a bi-weekly articles in the Brookline tab. And these topics will be on town government and its history, structure, and organization, and the role of multiple levels of engaged citizens as volunteers. Today, however, the subject is how to get elected in Brookline. We have with us representatives of different positions in Brookline town government. Town meeting members who are elected from 16 geographic precincts are the town's legislature. The select board is the chief executive office of the town. The school committee members oversee the administration and budget of the public school system. The library trustees oversee the administration and budget of public libraries. The Housing Authority Board oversees the administration, budget, and management of its units of affordable housing. And finally, we have a representative of the town constables who under state law are required to be bonded in order to fulfill their role of serving summons, complaints, and other legal notices. And there are two additional positions that will be voted at the May election for whom we do not have a representative to speak. The moderator, who is elected for a 3-year term, is the presiding officer of town meeting following the Massachusetts Moderator's guidelines. The moderator appoints members of the advisory committee, the town's finance committee, and of the Committee on Town Organization and Structure, whose members advise on bylaw amendments. And the other position, which we do not have a representative to speak to, is the town clerk, who is elected for a 3-year term and whose responsibilities are to provide fair and accurate elections, voter registration. The town clerk is the keeper of public records and serves as a notary public and a justice of the peace. Now, this year, this position is possibly going to cause some confusion because the town clerk position is on the same election as a ballot question where voters are going to be asked to make the town clerk an appointed position. This is because in November, the town meeting voted to amend town bylaws to change the town clerk to be appointed as a department head. This is similar to the town treasurer's position, which used to be elected and is now appointed and was changed several years ago. However, on a technicality, the position remains on the ballot until after the ballot question where the voters would, if the voters approve the change, to become an appointed position. I'm sorry about it being complicated. I've tried to explain it as clearly as I could. Anyway, we do welcome and appreciate questions from our viewers. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen. If you look at it, it's sort of at the bottom on the right, the band at the bottom of the screen on the right side. Leave a question in that, and at the end of our speakers' comments, we'll try to answer your questions. And now I will turn this over to my colleague, Ernie Fry, who will introduce the panel members and who will also serve as moderator for our discussion. Welcome to all of our panelists. Thank you for participating.
I want to thank all participants in this program. I have lots of respect for our panelists. All have expended considerable effort to convince Brookline voters that they are the best leaders for our town. And I'm grateful for their willingness to share their experiences regarding each of their positions. After deciding that they wished to run for the office they are representing, each of our panelists obtained a petition for that office from the town clerk's office. The petition for town meeting member requires signatures of at least 10 voters in their precinct. The petition for all other offices requires at least 50 signatures of Brookline voters. The petitions are now available from the town clerk, but because of constraints on social distancing, the town clerk has requested you're calling him for an appointment to schedule a pickup of that petition. The signed petitions must be returned by March 16, 2021 to qualify for the municipal election on May 4, 2021. This lead time permits timely and proper preparation and printing of the ballots. The town clerk's office publishes on their webpage a listing of the candidates who are eligible for re-election and those who have requested petitions. The status is updated each Friday. As of last Friday, there were 15 town-wide positions and 85 town meeting positions listed to be filled. There are 8 town meeting positions for which no candidates have yet requested petitions. We look for persons to step forward to try to fill those positions. We'll begin our presentations with a discussion of the town meeting member. This office is the one that most persons, but not all, deciding to become involved in local issues usually runs for first. Today we have town meeting member Debra Brown from Precinct 1 to tell us about his experiences. Debra, the floor is yours.
My name's Debra Brown. I'm a town meeting member. And one of the key questions that comes to mind for me is it's as simple as, why are you running? Who are you empowering? And I always say, I have to be specific about that. And what is it that I'm going to contribute? I also ask myself, am I willing to make the kind of commitment that's required? Ask your family if it's okay for you to run, and then go back and ask them again, and then ask maybe 6 or 7 more times, because the process, even if your race is contested, it can be a lot of work, just getting out there, meeting people, and learning the issues. I also want to talk briefly about the fact that depending on the diversity that you bring to the office, you're going to bring a perspective that might not otherwise be there. And so as an African-American woman, I oftentimes see race in ways that maybe someone else who's as kind-hearted as can be, they just don't see it. Whereas, when you look at women in legislatures and even in town meeting, we're the ones that, introduce those bills that sort of get at quality of life and economic issues. And so I think that one of the things we have to do is to ask ourselves, do we have the fire in the belly? Are we willing to do the work? And what's the value that we bring to town meeting? Now, I'm going to summarize very quickly some qualities that I think are essential as a candidate and as a town meeting member. Be on time. stay positive, focus on the issues and not the person, look for solutions. And also make sure that, you have adequate resources. Start fundraising as soon as possible. Even a town meeting race, you could end up spending, $1,000. Well, for a lot of us, that's real money. But if you have a plan, it can be a lot easier. So thank you. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Deborah. That's good information for us. We're going to proceed to the remaining offices that we're going to talk about are all town-wide offices. And we're going to begin at the top of the management of the town with Heather Hamilton, who will talk to us about being a select board member. Heather.
Thank you, Ernie. Major props for serving as a town meeting member. That's where I got my start. So I highly, highly, highly recommend putting your foot in the door that way. And for anyone who is interested in the role of select board member, I can definitely go into that. But let me focus on the race. So townwide is a completely different animal than town meeting member in some ways, but it does have some overlap in a couple of ways, which is you really need to get out and meet people. So you pull your papers, which is a euphemism for you go to town hall, you sign with the town clerk that you're interested in running. They give you an official ballot. You need to get signatures. Always get double the amount that are required, because you would be really surprised how many signatures are not counted. Either the person is not registered, or the signature, nobody can tell what the name says, so they can't sign off on the signature. So always get double the amount of signatures that are required for your office. Most townwide offices require 50 signatures. So, definitely get 100. And then as far as running, usually what has taken place in Brookline, there's a kickoff party. You'll want to get a treasurer for your campaign, because most townwide offices, you are raising somewhere in the neighborhood of $5,000, because usually what you do is you do a mailer. It is one of the best ways to get your face, your name, and your message to a lot of people in town who are registered to vote. Most people don't answer their door. Most people do not pick up when you call. So a townwide mailer, and you can get the list of frequent voters. That's what you're actually asking for at town hall. Ask for the list of frequent voters for the local election in May, which is the last. It's basically every voter who has they've showed up to vote for the past 3 May elections or local elections. So you can count on them to show up and vote. So you want to get your face, your name, and your message before those folks. So you can actually ask for that Excel spreadsheet that has the names, the mailing addresses for those people, so that you can put together a mailer and send something out. But first you need a campaign committee with a treasurer, so that you can actually legally take in funds. And then you'll want to, call town meeting members or call people throughout town to let them know that you're running. Ask for them to help you, a donation, or helping to design things, helping on the website, helping to make phone calls on your behalf. So get your kitchen cabinet, as we like to call it, together, which is about 5 people. I would not recommend anything bigger than that, because then those meetings take forever to get through. So you get some trusted confidants together. You get the list of frequent voters. You register with the state and the clerk's office that you have a legitimate campaign. You start to fundraise. You have a kickoff party to kind of announce that you're running, and it's just a really good opportunity to meet people. And then you start to do the debate circuit. So when I started a number of years ago, it was really the League of Women Voters that had a debate, and it was like 2 weeks before the election. But last year I was running for reelection to select board. I think I participated in over 11 forums. And so when Debra says to check with your family that they're okay with you signing on for this, she is absolutely right. You are pulled in a lot of directions. You are always taking phone calls. You have to make yourself available because even though the select board technically meets only once a week, the work pretty much doesn't stop. So I am happy to take questions during Q&A.
Heather, thank you very much for that, those excellent comments, and we look forward to further questions coming your way at the appropriate time. The next position that we're going to talk about is school committee, and that seems like another very overworked body in the town. We have Mariah Nobrega, who is going to speak to us about her experiences as a school committee member and her attempts to become one. Mariah.
Thanks, Ernie. Hi, everyone. My name's Mariah Nobrega, and I am a school committee member. I just ran for my first term for school committee last spring. And before I talk about that, I just want to talk about the things that I did before I ran for school committee that helped me learn more and realize I might want to run for school committee. I first ran for town meeting in 2009. I'm still a member of town meeting, so I've been a town meeting member now for almost 12 years. Being in town meeting is really helpful as a first step if you're running for townwide office. It gives you a much better view into how the town works and where the different areas are that we work in. Whether you're interested in schools or sustainability or diversity and inclusion or planning, there's so many different functions of the town. And town meeting is really a first step to start to meet the people who are involved and to learn more about the different issues that are at work. And as Debra alluded to earlier, an opportunity for you to start to make your own mark on where you might want to file legislation, for example. So it's a really great place to start. I personally have never spent more than about $50 for my town meeting races to put together a little flyer and have it printed out. And then walk around in my neighborhood and hand those out to people. As Heather said, you can get the frequent voter list, and that helps you target who in your precinct you would want to specifically reach out to. So I was in town meeting from 2009 on, and then in 2015, I joined advisory committee, which is the town's finance committee. I was the representative from my precinct. And I was on advisory committee from 2015 until this past, January, so January 2020. In the middle of that, I had a baby in 2017. As far as I know, I am the only person, as far as anyone who knows, I'm the only person who has been on advisory who had a baby while they were on advisory. And so that was hard. You know, my family, I have 2 older kids as well. So we had 3 kids, and juggling the responsibilities of advisory, which typically meets 2 to 3 nights a week for about 6 to 8 months a year or so, is significant. But as Debra said, ask your family, ask your family, ask your family, and then ask your family again, right? Because whatever we're doing in the town, you're doing it because you get excited, and then you get involved in things, and you need to make sure that your family is there to support you. Otherwise, it's just very stressful as you all try and figure out who's cooking dinner or who's doing the laundry or any of the other things that keep a house running. In last fall, so a little more than a year ago, now a year and a half ago, I decided I was interested in running for school committee. This was all pre-pandemic. I had thoughts and opinions about the way that things should be going in the schools, different things that I'd like to see. And so I decided to run for school committee. At that time, of course, we had no idea that the election season in the spring would be entirely virtual. And even when I pulled my papers and submitted them, that was all before everything closed down for all the in-person events closed down. So I was actually, I will say, kind of quote unquote lucky in that school committee last year was unopposed. And so while I did participate in a lot of Zoom events, Heather and I were crossing paths in a lot of Zoom events. Our race wasn't a competitive race. And so it's a different experience than being in a competitive race. I will say though that one of the things that I think is beneficial is many of the precincts and neighborhood associations are running different events, and having some of them even have monthly meetings. So if you're thinking about becoming a candidate, and if you are running for a town meeting office, you could talk to some of those groups to see if you can meet people at those Zooms. But certainly as a candidate for townwide office, you'll want to reach out to different community groups and see if you can attend any of those meetings. It's a really great place to meet people. And just as we said, as we heard from, I think, Heather earlier, having your name and your face and your message out there, in addition to a mailer if you're going to do that, but it's also another opportunity to meet people. Let me see, what are some of the other things I wanted to talk about? Oh, and then actually being on school committee. Being on school committee, as Ernie alluded to earlier, is a huge time commitment. There is the meetings that we have, which are, we have a full school committee meeting typically every other Thursday night. But then there's also, depending on how many subcommittees you're on and your responsibilities on those, it can be significant past that. Right now, I'm on the negotiation subcommittee, I'm chairing finance, and I'm on the capital subcommittee and also on the government relations subcommittee. And so I would say that in addition to, so all of those things plus trying to be responsive to the community, answering emails, engaging with people on social media is probably at least 15 hours a week. And so I just think it's important for people to realize the level of time commitment that is going into this. Last year there was, and the year before, there were warrant articles to provide possibly a stipend for school committee and for select board the year before. And for a lot of people, the time commitment is almost overbearing. And so it's just important for people to realize what they're getting into. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody who's interested in school committee, either during this presentation, during the Q&A, or privately. My email is on the town's website, on the PSB website, to talk about the kinds of things that we do in the time commitment and how I try to juggle it all. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariah. I appreciate your good words of wisdom there. We'll next go to one of a representative of a very important department in town that's kind of working under the covers at this point. But Karen Livingston can tell us a little bit about how the library committee, the library trustees are functioning, and what the status of our library is during this pandemic. Karen.
Thanks, Ernie. I'm Karen Livingston and trustee of the Public Library of Brookline. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss how to run for library trustee, but I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we do first. In Brookline, the Board of Library Trustees consists of 12 local residents who are elected to 3-year terms of office. I did run last year. Each year, 4 trustees are elected to the board, working closely with the director of the library. The trustees provide oversight of the library budget, its services, and its policies. The board responsibilities are generally divided into 6 major categories: legal, governance and policymaking, financial, strategic planning, human resources, and continuing education. We have both standing and ad hoc committees that address these responsibilities. The chair makes all committee assignments in the meeting following the general election. Each trustee is expected to serve on at least one standing committee and to help out as needed on ad hoc committees. Our standing committees are Library Services Committee, the Fiscal Committee, which is broken into 2 subcommittees, a Finance Committee and an Investment Committee. We have the Programming Committee, Building and Grounds Committee, and the Library Foundation Liaison and the Friends Liaison. Our current ad hoc committees include Strategic Plan, Staff Appreciation, and Advocacy. The entire board meets 1 evening a month. The committees must meet as needed. All meetings are open to the public. At the monthly board meetings, the director reviews library data, activities, staffing, and a host of relevant issues. The minutes of these meetings can be found on the library's website. You can get much more information on the roles and responsibilities of a library trustee from the Mass Board of Library Trustee Handbook. And I'm going to hold up the email address. Hopefully everyone can see it. You can also Google Mass Board of Library Trustees. To be an effective library trustee, consider yourself an ambassador to the library. Listen to the people in your community. Communicate with your town officials and continually advocate for the library. Now I'm going to kind of move into running for library trustee. One way to join the trustees is to run in a general election. And Heather and Debra and Mariah have spoken generally about this election. It takes work to establish name recognition and communicate one's positions to the voters in Brookline, but there's another option for library trustee. When there's a vacancy on the Board of Library Trustees, we conduct a special election. This year, we for the first time, filled 2 vacancies at the same time. Here's how that works. After notifying the select board of the vacancy, we post a notice advertising the opening. We use social media, listservs, community groups, town organizations, the BHA, and a variety of newsletters, magazines, and newspapers, both digital and paper. Our goal is to let everyone in Brookline know about this opportunity. The trustees review cover letters and resumes from all candidates. Short interviews using the same questions are held with each candidate. These interviews are all open to the public. Following the trustee interviews, all candidates move on to a joint convention of the select board and the trustees. After short interviews with each candidate, a public vote is taken to fill the vacancy. The candidate that gets the majority of votes will serve until the next general election. At the general election, they can choose to run for the time remaining in the vacated seat or to run against an incumbent for a 3-year term. This is the path that many trustees have taken, myself included. Running for town election, as you've heard from Heather and Mariah, can be daunting for someone not already involved in town politics. In our special election this year, we had 13 excellent candidates to fill 2 seats. If it had been a general election, we may have had 1 or 2 candidates at most come forward. Even though every trustee must eventually run in a general election, entering through a special election eases candidates into the process. Whether coming to the board through a special election or a general election, anyone running for library trustee should familiarize themselves with the activities of the board by reading the minutes and the MBLA trustee handbook. In addition, talk to people in the community about the library. Ask them which one of our 3 wonderful libraries they use, which services they use, what could be improved, and what they love. Feel free to contact the trustees. We are here to share what we do and provide you with all the information we have at hand. This knowledge will give you something to talk about as you craft your League of Women Voters essay and your Zoom campaign presentations. Heather, when she ran the first time, and I was there at every one of those presentations, and I got to know all the other candidates really well. Most importantly, if you're elected, getting all of this information will make you a better library trustee. So I had already prepared this talk when I was asked to address some important issues regarding structural barriers to women's participation in running and serving as a library trustee. And I thought back, it was pretty far back when I first joined the trustees. I was one of only 2 women on the board, and the other 10 members were older white men. I was the only one with young children in the house. I had 3 sons. The youngest was 4 years old. My husband covered for me with the kids so that I could attend evening board meetings. When I was away, I was able to hire a babysitter. During the pandemic, the board recognized that working remotely reduced barriers for participation. 3 of us had major surgery this past year and were able to attend meetings remotely soon after. We can make serving as a library trustee more accessible to everyone. Women, people with disabilities, people who don't have cars, people who are single parents, the list goes on and on. We can make it accessible to everyone in town if we are able to continue with our remote meeting options. So we on the board, library board, are discussing this. It looks like we're going to have remote meetings going out quite a while, but it's a topic of conversation on all of our minds. Today, I am very happy to say, after we just filled those 2 vacancies I talked to you about, we have 8 women and 4 men on the board, as well as a female library director. So we've come a long way since I originally joined. And that's all I have to say. I would love to answer any questions. And whenever there has been an election, people have always reached out to the library trustees, and I think it's a great idea.
Appreciate your comments there. And especially the impact that you've had in turning around making it more female library trustees, speaking on behalf of the League of Women Voters. I always enjoy working with the women better anyway. Okay, now we will turn to the Housing Authority. When we have a woman to represent us there, Joanne Sullivan will tell us what the Housing Authority's responsibility are to a large population of our town, and what's involved in running for that office.
Great.
Joanne.
Thanks, Ernie. Thank you very much. Welcome everybody who is featured on the panel today. And also welcome to all of you who are listening in or watching us in this odd, middle of the pandemic time. In reviewing what I wanted to note on my comments, there were really 3 things that came up for me in considering running for the Brookline Housing Authority. And the first thing, and this is really echoing what Debra mentioned, a real knowledge and appreciation for the community that we live in and how we can contribute. Also, a real curiosity about the community beyond what you know. You really need to be willing to learn more about the community, about the people we serve in the Housing Authority, and how the Housing Authority works here in Brookline. The second thing would be experience or a background in affordable housing. As Housing Authority Commissioners, we provide guidance and oversight to the work of the Brookline Housing Authority. And some of that work becomes more complex and more intricate as the days go by, not just the weeks and the months. We're in the middle of, for our federal sites, doing rental assistance demonstration program rehabilitation. And in particular, we're very pleased about the future of the Colonel Floyd redevelopment project, which is right on Harvard Street. We're going to not only be able to rehab the units that are there now, but we're going to be able to add a considerable number of new affordable housing units here in Brookline. So that's pretty exciting. We go through so many funding sources at the Housing Authority, federal and state and town areas. These have got to be carefully allocated and categorized and properly spent to best benefit the people that we serve. We are, as most of you know, working with inadequate funding. This is endemic for housing authorities across the United States, and especially at the state level with state public housing. In Brookline, as in many communities in New England, we're dealing with older housing stock. Some of the buildings that we oversee and manage were built in the 50s and the 60s, and they have been very well lived in and very well loved by many generations of families. They need work, they need capital maintenance, so we really try to stretch those dollars as much as we can. Managing that really needs a wealth of experience, and currently on the board, we've got experience in all aspects of affordable housing, whether legal, management and construction, consulting, financial, legislative and regulatory, and that is and has been extremely helpful. I can't say enough, however, about the fact that we've got a terrific executive director in Mr. Michael Alperin, and a great staff that is also extremely knowledgeable and extremely good at what they do. And number three, a real understanding of and a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have at the Housing Authority staff a very diverse group of folks. The people that we serve at Brookline Housing Authority are diverse as well. And this is across all demographics, whether elderly, disabled, single head of household, women and families. Our notices at the BHA are available in 4 languages, and those are English, Mandarin, Russian, and Spanish. And those are probably the top languages that are spoken most commonly in and among Housing Authority residents, but there are a number of additional languages that are spoken too. So just to close, 3 things: a real curiosity and a willingness to learn more about Brookline and our community, experience and background in an aspect of affordable housing, and a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And just 2 notes for me. I don't want to repeat what the other folks on the panel have said, but one thing I really would stress, especially during the time of the pandemic, is take full advantage of websites and Facebook, and also for those of us who did innumerable coffees and gatherings and get-togethers on Sunday afternoons, Tuesday evenings, and whenever else we could. Be sure to invite your friends and your colleagues to host Zoom meetings and Zoom coffees for you. It may not be as good as face-to-face and one-on-one meetings, but at least it will give you an opportunity to speak a bit to people, ask questions, answer questions, and learn a little bit more about other people that the people on that particular Zoom meeting or at that Zoom coffee might want to introduce you to after hearing you. So I really do stress those 2 points as well. I think that's it for me, and I'm also happy to answer any questions. Thanks, Ernie.
Okay, you're very welcome. I'd like to at this point go to our constable position and introducing Christine Knopf. The constable we don't usually have in every election, but we happen to have a vacancy this year, for this election cycle. So Christine can talk to what is required to be a constable and what the duties are and that sort of stuff. Christine, tell us what you know.
Can you hear me?
We
Can you hear
can.
me? Okay,
Yep.
good. I'm kind of the newbie in the group. in this group and constable. So I'll give you a little bit of the nucleus and how the constable is, some of the duties and why I ran. So I've broken it down into 3 sections. I'm Christine Knopf. I'm one of 4 constables right now in the town of Brookline, and it's a position to go onto the ballot. Again, as everyone's discussed, it's 50 signatures. I know Heather goes up to 100 and I did 60 and I was okay. So that was my legwork. The requirement is to be a resident of Brookline and to be a registered voter. So that's pretty easy. The constable positions, it's a 3-year term and the candidates all run in the same year. In 2022, there will be again 5 positions to run for. But as Ernie said, this year, unfortunately, one of our constables, Stanley Rabinowitz, passed. So for the last few months, we've been with only 4 constables. And it's an opening that's going to be hopefully filled this May. That's why we're having this, to let you know about the opening for 1 constable. And then in 2022, we'll be back to looking for 5 candidates. I was elected in 2019. And at that time, there were 5 positions and 6 candidates. So it was a little bit contested. In 2019, at that time, I'd also completed 2 years of town meeting member in precinct 15. And I still hold that position as I was reelected in 2020. The nuts and bolts of constable, although I haven't done all of this, and I think that there's some that have been much more experienced than I, but it's basically to post and serve. How do you like that? Posting is anything that the town would like to have posted. And that usually involves the posting for town meetings and elections. Where do we post this? We post this in every precinct, except 12 and 13 is together at Runkle. So that's 1 posting there. But we have places where we are to post in every precinct before, usually, as I said, town meetings and elections. The other part is serve. This is a little more complicated because it's up to the attorneys to give you a summons for an eviction, a divorce, or something else that isn't usually very pleasant. I have only done 1 joint eviction. I did this with another one of the constables to see what the process was. And this was all, again, pre-pandemic. And I'm not sure with the pandemic what's been going on with the court system since then. If you're called for any of these duties and you're unable to do it, you can always call your other constable friend and say, hey, and that happened to me once when I was working at my other job, and they said, sure, we'll take it. And then you give them the name and number. So constable to constable, sometimes these duties are shared or passed off. In campaigning, I found this to be a lot easier than select board, school committee, or some of these other positions. Basically, I was in pre-COVID, so I was able to be in town hall. I could be at all the various meetings and see people. I made my own badge. I did not have any fundraising that was required. And also at that time, I was working on another town-wide campaign. So as I went to other precincts, I said, oh, by the way, this is me. This is what I'm running for. And again, emails, as everyone's talked, friends, family, and their address books and registered voters in Brookline. When I decided to run, I was semi-retired and I was encouraged by friends and neighbors. I know Brookline very well. I've been fortunate to be here for about 28 years. And my son was in the school system here from K to 12, lots of baseball games. And he's currently a Brookline firefighter. The town's been good to me, and I now had this opportunity to serve. In my nursing career, it's also kind of a joke. I did 15 years of visiting nursing, and I had no fear of knocking on doors. So that was something I think in my favor. I think that it was helpful being a town meeting member, but to run for this position, I would not say that that's required. It's, I would like to encourage sometimes people out of our crowd, out of the town meeting, out of everything that we represent, to maybe bring some new fresh blood, fresh perspective into this, because I think that's one good thing about constable. Really, you just need to know the town and know the responsibilities, but I don't think that town meeting member is necessarily a stepping stone into this position. That's it.
Thank you, Christine. Whoops. Oh yeah, Christine. Thank you for your comments and suggestions. I think most people will hear that have heard that while running for town meeting is helpful, it is not necessarily a prerequisite for some of these townwide offices. And I think that's a good thing for people to understand and know. I'm going to call on Neil Gordon, who has been the treasurer for many of the townwide offices that he's kind of like the go-to guy. And I hope he may give us some comments regarding running. He is a town meeting member, advisory committee, and a constable. So he may be able to add to some of the comments that you all have made. Neil.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to the panelists for an excellent presentation. Ernie's asked me to speak a little bit about campaign finance, and I'll give you the good news first, which is if you are contemplating running for town meeting members are exempt from the campaign finance laws. So you can raise a little bit of money, you can spend a little bit of money, and you don't need to report that to anybody, and you can do that without restriction. Now, the bad news, if you're running for a townwide office, you're subject to the campaign finance laws. They're not particularly complicated, but you'll need to organize a campaign finance committee. You need to find a treasurer, and there are required campaign finance reports 15 days before the election, 8 days before the election, 30 days after, and then at year end. And there are limits on how much you can raise from any one individual. It's $1,000. Good luck if you're running locally and find somebody who's willing to give you $1,000. But they need to be reported. So there are limits. You can't collect money from corporations and the like. If you are interested in running townwide, finding a treasurer can be hard. No, I am not looking for new gigs. Thank you very much. But the offer stays open if you find somebody interested. The reporting is really pretty simple, and the record keeping is pretty simple. You find somebody who you think is okie dokie with a spreadsheet, and then you have them reach out to me, and I'll give them the the 45-minute little training seminar. Happy to do it, and happy to answer any questions on campaign finance. I do encourage anyone thinking of running, in particular for town meeting, to not overthink it. Make your appointment at town hall, get a petition. Your signature counts. You now only need 9 more. And step up and get involved. It is not the heaviest of lifting, and you can have considerable influence over policy and practice here in your town.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate that. I would ask if any of the panelists have any additional comments they wish to make as a result of hearing all of the other panelists. And just to let you say, Heather, I believe you wish to Tell us. Go ahead. Karen.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to my comments from before. The Women's Commission had reached out to us when we were named as panelists for this and asked us to discuss any barriers that we faced when we were considering running. I don't really necessarily think of them as gender barriers, but I guess in hindsight is different. So I remember when I was a town meeting member and having my first conversation with someone who was also a town meeting member at the time about whether or not I should run for select board. And I've always thought that I was going to run for office someday, but it was going to be, far off into the future after I had my family and retired, because that's just what I saw. And this very supportive friend of mine said, "Oh no, I think you should run now." And I remember my reaction as being, well, I didn't grow up here. I don't have kids in the schools. I don't own property. Who's going to vote for me? And he assured me that those issues probably were not as big to overcome as I thought that they were in my mind. And so, thank goodness that there are people who are encouraging people who might be interested, but might think that they don't have enough to contribute to the conversation. So that was just one of the barriers that I faced. And I don't know if it was just, something that I did to myself, or if it's, a culture that had been perpetuated for a very long time. I don't know, but I'm so glad that somebody talked me into running because I've really enjoyed it. I'll take a stab at some of the questions that we see in Q&A. How familiar do you need to be with finance and budgeting to serve as a town meeting member? I really didn't have that much experience when I started in town meeting. Town meeting will be an education on budgeting, and I think it's fantastic. All you really need is a curious mind and the discipline to go through the documents that you're provided. And then one of the other questions is, there are many ways for voters to vote: early voting, absentee. Last year, I mean, I consider myself pretty knowledgeable about campaigns. I've done a lot of them, but last year was so different from campaigns that I've been a part of. You really need to do things a lot earlier. You need to be a lot more flexible, and you need to raise a lot more money, because even though you can rely on social media, you're not able to really knock on doors. People still don't feel safe. So I had to rely on getting my message out, and most of those impressions cost money. So that's my words of wisdom for, a post-COVID campaign.
Thank you, Heather. Debra Brown, you're on.
So I also think that the budget and finance piece is not as complicated as you might think it is, but you have to read the budget, and you have to read it carefully. One of the things that I found that was most helpful for me in terms of understanding the town's budget, well, there were two things. One was talking to people who are familiar with the budget. And the other thing was trying to align a need with a funding source. So I've been pushing additional funding for state-funded Brookline public housing. Well, that required a budget amendment. So it meant I had to figure out what a budget amendment was. And that meant I needed to find a group of people that were supportive of the budget amendment. And so there are all of these different strands that end up getting pulled to sort of come at one piece. But I think if you think of it in terms of a project or a policy that you want to see implemented, understanding the budget becomes a lot easier. So.
Thank you.
I can just add to that, from my own personal long history in town government politics, that understanding the town's finances is something that you can learn, and for specific purposes, it's quite valuable. The good news there is that the town has extraordinarily qualified staff people who are available to answer questions. And recently, the town administrator held a budget sort of overview workshop. I hope there will be more of those coming in other years, because I think it's a good way to have a picture of where the town's, how the town operates and what its sources of funding are. Some of them are more straightforward and some of them are fairly complicated. And I also know from personal experience that, and I think Joanne Sullivan could speak to this as well, specifically, there's certain categories like affordable housing, where there are sources that are state and federal that require all kinds of, God help us, let's say, knowledge and understanding and stepping through a variety of processes in order to be effective and successful. And that's just one example of a specific kind of funding that's in a particular area. You really do need to become better informed in order to be able to be successful. Anyway, other questions coming from we have in the Q&A, also early voting, absentee voting, and should candidates think about the timing of their outreach, particularly in the time of COVID? Anybody want to comment about that? Yeah, Mariah.
Yeah, I think that assuming that everyone knows what this is about, but just in case, as people know, you don't have to just go vote on election day. There are both scheduled and unscheduled times that people can vote, and as well as requesting their ballots for absentee balloting. And I do think it's really important for people to not wait until too close. There's this trade-off, right? Because you want to make sure that people have you as the last thing in their mind before they go vote. But when is that time that they're going to write something in? And so how do you make that trade-off? And I honestly think that that going on the earlier side of that, because you just don't know and you don't want to leave it until the last minute. I do know that I organized an event in my precinct last spring, a Zoom meeting for people to meet candidates. And one of the voters said to me afterwards, oh, I actually submitted my ballot like the first day they were eligible or something like that, which was a couple days before this. And I wish I had known, because I wouldn't have voted the way I had. But it just goes to show exactly the issue here is we want to make sure that you'll want to make sure that as soon as a voter decides to vote, that you are in their mind as a candidate they should be considering.
Okay. And we have a question that I think probably has been answered, but I'm going to give people an opportunity to comment again. One person said, must one begin as a town meeting member to participate in town affairs, or can you get started in another way? Or is there a beginner's playbook that may not be evident to someone who is new or who hasn't been politically active? So anybody have any thoughts for the newcomer? Where do you start? Christine?
Well, if you look at the constables right now, Joe Figler and Neil Gordon have been there the longest time. So if anyone's looking to run as constable, I would get in touch with either Joe Figler or Neil, who have years of experience doing that. So I think that's how you would need to reach out to the individual person to run and to get a little tutorial on what to do. And as far as constable, no, town meeting member is not required to do that. If you have the lay of the land and a feel for the town, you'd be okay.
Okay, any other thoughts? Deborah?
Oh, go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say that the prerequisite for running for a library trustee is a love of the library. And that's probably much more important than being a town meeting member. And you really can, Deborah, you said that you can learn about budgeting, finance, by paying attention to all of the handouts that you're given. And you really do learn on the job. And if you're willing to put in the time, and Betsy has this great tree of all the different town organizations, which I think she's planning on.
We'll put it up in a little while, and probably right after this.
Yeah, but you'll see that, if you go and investigate all of those organizations, and you use all the libraries, and you talk to everyone in your community regularly, and they know to contact you with their comments, that's it. That's all your preparation. So.
Okay, other people? Deborah, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it helps to have a fire in the belly around an issue, some passion, and passion and time. I think are really what you need. And sometimes an easy way to figure out what your fit is to actually, you can go to different board and commission meetings, you can go to select board meeting, and as Karen was saying, just pop in on a Zoom, talk to people. One of the first people that I talked to when I was thinking about running was Tommy Vitola, and he gave me some excellent advice. I mean, I'm a bit of an introvert, and I think he sensed that. And so he kind of pushed me in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise pushed myself. But I think you have to get out and talk to people, and not necessarily the people that are closest to you. The people that may just create enough of attention that you're stretching, intellectually as well as emotionally. But the fire in the belly is important.
Thank you. And Heather, are you offering to speak?
So a couple of thoughts. Deborah's correct. This is a great time to pop in to a lot of boards and commission meetings that when a lot of people didn't have the time to physically show up. So now it's, so much easier to just pop in and pop out and just get a flavor of, the volunteer opportunities. The other thing that I've seen, and I'm not sure that I recommend this, but I've seen it a couple of times. Sometimes people will be so passionate about an issue that they end up being a petitioner of a warrant article before they become a town meeting member. And I would highly recommend being a town meeting member before you become a petitioner of a warrant article, because it's a slog. But I have seen it done where somebody is so passionate about an issue that they go through the warrant article process. And then they're so inspired by the process that they run for town meeting. So just another, avenue to consider.
And, I'm just going to throw in from my own history and experience. People get involved in different ways over time, probably less true in the pandemic conditions, but at certain times, just for somebody who happened to be a parent, getting involved with your local school's PTO would give you a whole, a universe of people who you would find common interests with. And then we'll put this chart up, and part of the interest that you can create is just being a volunteer on many different, there's all kinds of different things that you could possibly volunteer with. And it may have to do with a function in the town, but it could just as easily be a citizens organization that then interacts with some of these other groups. I became involved with something called the Brookline, let's see, now I'm going to get it wrong. I'm about to say the wrong thing. The Brookline Improvement Coalition, which has become over time what's called a community development corporation, and has much greater opportunity to assist in creation of affordable housing in the town. But it was a volunteer, from my experience, it was simply a volunteer experience where I learned about affordable housing and some of the complexities of how you fund it. But there are other community organizations across the town with different purposes that give people an opportunity to maybe get involved with a particular kind of cause, but you can just as easily also meet a lot of people and figure out, oh, hey, this is something I care about and I want to do more with. So I would say for someone who's new to the community, it may be hard to figure out where to start, but I guess I'm going to also say there's lots of starting places and what you need to do. And I'm agreeing in a sense with what Debra was saying. You want to have a lot of commitment and emotional engagement, but you find something that fits your experience and your knowledge and your background, get active. And then the next thing you know, somebody's going to say, hey, would you like to run for, and fill in the blank. It could be library trustee, it could be a town meeting member, but there will be opportunities. I certainly think looking at the breadth of the town is important. And people who are involved with open space, for example, the Brookline Green Space Alliance, there are just a lot of different ways that you can start. Debra, you put your hand up. So now unmute, please.
Yes, you mentioned the Brookline Improvement Coalition, and I'm going to put in a shameless plug. I'm
Sorry.
not vice president, consistent with my passion for affordable housing. It has turned into almost a part-time job, but we need board members. We need board members with experience in development. We need board members experienced in affordable housing finance. So that is my pitch, because I envision a Brookline where you don't have to be the richest of the rich or the poorest of the poor to live here. We have to create, resources for, those people making $120,000 a year that can't afford anything. So that was my shameless plug, Betsy.
Neil, unmute, please.
Thank you. Unmuted. I'd like to respond to the, do you have to run for town meeting first? So whether it be town meeting or a townwide office, you're running for a job, you're making your pitch, and the decision is made by the voters. If you can convince the voters that you'd be the best moderator, you don't have to have been a town meeting member, you don't have to have been anything. If you can sell the voters and get more votes than the other candidate, then you get to be the moderator. And that's true of the other townwide offices, and it's true for town meeting as well. The only requirement for any of these offices is that you be a registered Brookline voter.
That's true.
Now,
That's important to say. You have to be a registered voter
you have to be a
in order
registered
to be
Brookline voter.
eligible.
And
That's
those
the basic requirement.
And those who sign your petitions. Now, not to leave Debra Brown with the only shameless plug for this particular presentation, there's an additional shameless plug for a presentation that's coming up on Friday morning, and that is a how to write a warrant article presentation. Sean Lynn Jones and I did this about a year ago, and I'll say this, particularly since it's a virtual presentation. Whether you're thinking of submitting a warrant article or not, this particular presentation will help anyone watching understand the process by which an article comes to the floor of town meeting and ultimately is voted by town meeting, and it either passes or fails depending upon the vote. But that process starts way in advance with someone submitting a warrant article and getting signatures, and then working through the process of the advisory committee, the select board, public hearings, other public boards, committees, and commissions. If you want to know how the town works in regards to how our laws are made, how the budget is passed. You'll learn that in this presentation. Hopefully, you'll learn a lot from Sean. Let me put it that way. So that's my shameless plug.
Well, I appreciate that because the League of Women Voters second Friday morning event is that very topic. And Neil has been mentioning something that will be this Friday, starting at 9:30 in the morning. And we will be discussing what is a warrant article, how to draft one, how to file one, and basically the warrant article process. So I appreciate that plug, Neil, very much. And there are no more questions. So I think maybe we are at the moment of conclusion. Is there anybody who wants to add anything before we come to an end? Okay, if I don't see I don't see a hand raised.
There's a question about how much time per week for each of these volunteer positions on average. Was that answered?
What did I see that? Oh, how much time? Oh, wow. Okay, I missed that one. I apologize. You can actually, that is a good question. How much time per week do you give to your volunteer town position on average? Anybody want to take this one on? Karen, please, and then Joanne.
I think for the board, it varies with your commitment. You can do as little as attending one board meeting a month and then your committee and subcommittee work. But if you really want to represent the town well, you would put in a great deal more time. It's really up to the individual that gets that's elected. So you can consider it a part-time job. As my children think I work at the library. And they're so proud, and they tell all of their friends that their mother works at the library. And I view it that way. I view it as a part-time job. I'm not sure that's always the case.
Well, that might be a fair description. Joanne, did you have something you wanted to add?
I did, and I really echo what other folks have said, and in particular Karen's. It also is a little bit seasonal. We are right in the middle of budget season at the Housing Authority. That means additional meetings as necessary, and also when there are particular items that come up. For example, the Newbury College / Well Tower / Colonel Floyd / RAD development that we've just been through at town meeting with the select board, and thank goodness for the support of the town of Brookline. That took extra time as well, because you wanted to be absolutely sure that the most helpful information and the most accurate information was out so that people could access it and read it. So it really does depend on what happens to be before us, and also sometimes what is happening outside the Housing Authority or outside any of these agencies, and not just within.
I totally agree from my own experience. Heather.
Select board is a very big time commitment, and I'm fortunate that I have an employer who understands and allows me to have a very flexible schedule, and I don't have kids, so I don't have to manage that. Otherwise, I don't know. I don't know how Mariah does it, because I actually think the school committee is more work than select board. The other thing that makes it a little challenging, so I would say it definitely is seasonal. So during warrant article season and budget season, our meetings go 5 hours easily. So if I had to average it out, I'd say between 12, 15 hours a week, with the meetings and the phone calls and the select board meeting that goes quite a long time. The other thing that has kind of started to wear on me over time, there's just a level of ignorance about the way that local government, especially town government, works. When I get the angry phone calls from people, they really think that this is my full-time job. and they expect me to be in town hall and to have access to all the employees, and that's just not the case. And it's very frustrating to be at the top but not be in town hall and have your finger on the pulse of things. So that can be a lot to kind of just either accept and let go of, or to, to try to change, and to try to change an institution that dates back hundreds of years it takes more than one person.
Yeah, I certainly understand and appreciate. I guess I'm going to say, back when I was on the select board, my life was a little more flexible than it would have been when I was younger. And that becomes a component, so to speak, of some of these positions, where if you are, if you're Mariah and you're younger and you have young kids and maybe have a job in addition, you are really being put, you have to stretch a lot, and you have to get full support from your family. Anyway, Deborah, you thought you have more thoughts? I see your hand up.
Yeah. My thought was, sometimes I would say that from after spring warrant article to mid-July, I do nothing. And then if I usually have, I don't know, maybe a couple of warrant articles. And that can be 20 hours a week, because that warrant article may be 3 pages long. And I've been told I don't need to add all my citations, but I could easily spend 100 hours just trying to make sure that I know what I'm talking about. I mean, that's just the research piece of it. That's not even the interviewing people and trying to get people, who are interested in the same things to sign on to the warrant article. And the same thing happens in the spring. It starts as an idea. I hate the way this town allows people to chop down trees. I would like to see, maybe a 10 circumference limit, and then you pay a horrific fine for everything above and beyond that. Well, I know that there are limits on how much a town can fine people. So it's like all of this process that you end up having to go through just to submit something. And oh, by the way, you've got a gazillion meetings that you've got to go. I mean, advisory committee becomes its own part-time job, and all of the other committees. But what I will say is that I've been very fortunate to be able to shine a light on equity issues in ways that, complement the work of other people. And so it's something, it's not just a giving here. I get a lot out of it, but for chunks of the year, it is a serious part-time job, and I'm fortunate or unfortunate enough not to need to work. So, but it can be a lot, especially if you get into the warrant article business.
Well, I'm just going to refer back to the organizational chart for the town, which has at the very top in capital letters, citizens. And one of the things that is, in my view, important to think about as we discuss all of these things in terms of the time it takes and all of the responsibilities that go along with it, we are also very much engaged in a very grassroots representative kind of government in which people have an opportunity. Now, I know the League of Women Voters history, and I know that it took 40 years after women got the right to vote before there was an elected woman to the Brookline Select Board in those days, not a select board, but anyway. But we've made progress, and we continue to make progress. And our goal, I think, should always be never to let go, but to keep working on it and have citizen engagement as a primary goal of our overall interests in how the town operates. No, having said that, my little speech, I thank you all for being part of this. You've shared your personal experiences, and I think for anybody who's interested in thinking about running for office, it's very important to know what it felt like from somebody who actually did it. So that's great. We appreciate it all. And I just want to remind people that on the Brookline League of Women Voters website, there is the How to Run booklet. And on the Town of Brookline's website, there is the Town Meeting Members Handbook. And both of those have the information, the sort of the basic information that anybody running for office would need in order to go forward. It was very helpful. Thank you, Neil, to remind people about being a registered voter. That's the requirement, basically. And then beyond that, different offices have different requirements. But we do very much encourage people to participate, because that's how we all benefit from everyone's shared knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Neil, did you have your hand up?
One quick comment. So in order to run for town meeting or run for townwide office, you need to be a registered voter, which means you need to be a citizen. To volunteer and serve on any board, committee, or commission, other than where you have to be a town meeting member, for example, to serve. But for any other board, committee, or commission, there is no requirement anymore that you be a citizen. For most, there's no age requirement. You are either, the best for that position according to the appointing authority or not. And so if you are a resident of Brookline, not eligible to be a registered voter, there is a place for you to participate in this government.
Thank you, Neil. That's an important point. So I appreciate everyone's contributions today. And I also want to make a big thanks to the Big for the recording, and for Antheus, who helped get us organized and operating. But it's good to be able to say to everybody that this will be available and people can view it. People who weren't able to watch it in real time will have that opportunity. And there it is on the screen, where to go to watch this again, or to invite people who didn't have a chance to be with us today to share your wisdom and experience. We all appreciate it. And I should also specifically say thank you very much to my colleague Ernie for his organizational skills and helping to get everybody in and on board. I totally appreciate it, and I hope everyone on the panel agrees with me. So thank you all, and thanks to Big, and with luck, people will have an opportunity to learn from this, from the shared experiences, which we all very much appreciate. Thank you and goodbye.